Welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. I'm one of your co hosts. I'm Dr. Joe Hamlett. And as always, alongside me is Dr. Dave Peltz. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. And beside you is figurative.
Well, if they're looking at a screen,
Yeah, that's
uh,
true.
so we're already starting with some confrontation. So, okay.
And
All
today's
right.
topic is no.
Well, so again, thanks for those of you who have tuned in to the podcast. Thanks for returning, and for those of you who are brand new, if you didn't know, this is the personal, professional, and career development podcast where we want to assist you with your journey. Again, and I say this many times, I'm on a journey. Dave's on a journey. We're on a journey together. So that's what we want to help you do is be on your journey as impactful as you can be. So hopefully we can contribute to that. So if you are not familiar, the way we do this is one of us will do the introduction and then we'll quickly hand it off to the other person to start to fill in some of those blanks. And so for today's topic, it's not necessarily a new topic, but it's kind of a spin off of a previous topic that we've done because talk so much about growing, developing, and all those things, but there's something that's really closely associated with that growth and development that you also need to consider. So with that, the topic for today's podcast is me time. And so, whatever that means for you. So, me and Dave are going to maybe talk through some tips and tricks that you can do to help you concentrate on that me time. So, Dave, what are your thoughts about me time?
Joe, we were talking about this before we started the podcast, and it is an interesting idea. It is something that we don't really pay a lot of attention to, and we think is
Yep.
can be kind of an extracurricular or if I ever get the time, I'll do it.
Right. Yep.
Because our lives are so busy and, we've got family, we've got friends, we've got work, we've got kids, we've got, maintaining your household, your apartments, your cars, whatever. Where do we find that me time?
Yep.
And, my me time used to be my 45 to 50-minute commute work to work and back.
Right.
But is that really me time? Because if you're on autopilot and you're driving, that's not necessarily a good thing.
Yep.
So, as we've talked before and offline, there are different types of me time, and they can range from hobbies to mindfulness exercises and meditation to where we where one of the things that we were focused on before the podcast was low to no cost activities
Right.
outside of the house,
Yep.
getting away from the enclosed environments of the office or home and getting out and what can you do at low to no cost. And so pulling on that idea a little bit, we start thinking about, okay, we can take a walk, or maybe we go hiking in a public park or something like that. Or what about a state park or state monument? Those are free to low to no cost. Maybe the zoo or children's museum or museum. Some of those are low to no cost. Um, National Parks Pass. There is a cost to it, but if you get a year pass, it's basically unlimited for as many parks as you can go to for that fee. Or if you're a veteran or Gold Star member of the military, it's a free lifetime pass, and that becomes a no cost for the national monuments and parks and that sort of thing. So, what are these things that we can think of that are low to no cost, that are only maybe 30 minutes to a couple of hours, that gets us out of this box of home life and work life and gets us away so we can clear our mind? Maybe it's going to a movie that's low cost to no cost. What are these things that we can do to just free our mind completely of everything and just enjoy the moment or the scenery?
Right. So Dave, that's a good introduction to again some of the ways that you can, make sure you create that space or that me time for yourself to disconnect, to separate from all those things. And I'll admit, this past about a month ago, I did a little bit more. I did a little bit. It was low cost, but it was more extreme than honestly I'd ever done. And I actually, jumped on a flight and flew out to spend a few days with Dave. And I honestly have to say, and I told him this the first night we were there, just kind of looking under the stars or looking up at the stars. I said, "This is the most peaceful I've ever been," and that's the impact that um, me time was for me. It was hugely needed, hugely appreciated. Again, Dave being a great host, but at the same time, just me not thinking of work or thinking of all the other distractors, but it was a way for me just to completely separate and to definitely recharge my batteries and to, get prepared for the next days, weeks, and months. And so I'm really surprised at, how old I am. I'd never really done that, taken the time to do that. And so, again, appreciate Dave inviting me out to his home and us, taking that time. But that was for me a huge gain and benefit for my own sanity, for my own sense of me and who I am. Because again, not to have done that in so many years, it's surprising that I haven't, gone off the deep end in some cases. So, not realizing how bad I needed that. But that again, it wasn't much of a cost, but that is a little bit more expensive than some of the things that Dave introduced. The walks and maybe a park or something like that. But it was well. It definitely was a huge uplift for me to get away completely like that. And so, if you are able to do that, I recommend, and it could be just next town over or
Mhm.
something to that degree. So it still can be low cost, but the idea is to get away from those familiar surroundings and then not come back for a period of time. Because, like they just mentioned, if you go for a walk, you're going to come back to that home, that environment. But to get away, 1,000 miles away, that's a little different. So, again, in my case, that was what the doctor ordered. It was definitely well needed. Did not knowing that I needed that, but that was a well deserved break for me. So,
Yeah, and Joe, when you were out, one of the things you mentioned really, really hit a chord with me, and that was that you said that whenever you take a trip or go someplace, you're driving. It's always been that way.
right,
You've
yeah,
never been sitting in the passenger seat for hours, and I think that's a very important perspective, being in that
right,
passenger seat.
yeah,
Because to your point, maybe it's the town over, maybe it's a day trip. That's
right,
just an hour's drive away or 2 hours drive away, and you spend your day, you know, another town looking at what it has to offer,
right,
just out of that familiar zone. And I think that familiar zone was you driving. So that means you were
right,
preoccupied and now you weren't. And I think that's important because that could be that me time, letting someone else do the
absolutely,
driving,
yeah,
taking a train ride or whatever, a bus ride to where
yeah,
you're not focused on something else because that then
right,
becomes a distraction. You had time to observe and appreciate and absorb everything that was new to you.
right,
My wife and I just recently spent a few days um, in the northern part of Arizona, and that was our me time because we went to these national monuments and we took the time. We got out. We walked around a little bit. We appreciated what was around us that we hadn't seen before, or had been decades since we've seen those things. And that's the sort of thing that we're talking about. It doesn't have to be across country. It
right,
could just
right,
be someplace unfamiliar to have that me time. Maybe it is your favorite spot. Maybe it's your favorite park or state park or whatever, where you go out and you do a hike that is just you by yourself. Or maybe
right.
it is in your garage doing your favorite hobby because you've neglected to do it because of your schedule, because of your personal life and your professional life. There's so much going on, you
That
know. But
I just want to touch on what you mentioned, and again, thanks for bringing that up because again, you're right. I
mhm,
did mention the fact that I'm typically driving. I'm typically the person responsible for getting us there, or So to sit in that passenger seat definitely was a different perspective. So to your point, even if you go to the same locations, um, but you're not driving, you're not the one in control, you're not the one, burning up the the mind cells or the cells to think about, all those distractors, but being, present in the passenger seat, or even if it's the back seat, but just you not having that responsibility to do that. And I didn't realize that because I'm typically not a passenger. So just seeing it from that perspective, like you said, being able to take in the sights, not having to worry, and just kind of just hanging out was a different feeling for me. And again, it added to that me time. It's, it's all about me,
Right.
and it really, that's why, I said over and over that it was a very good experience for me because I have not done that in the past. So again, just a different, being in a different position, going to the same location is
Mhm.
different, and so I just didn't realize how different that could be, by not having that experience in the past. So today's point, just a different perspective. It
Mhm.
is adding to your me time. It's helping you look at things differently. Is also a good thing. But I also want to touch on, you talked about going to the zoo, I think early on, and just last night the wife was talking about, next state over, there's a petting zoo that she wants to go to. And so, again, just some of those things that are close by,
Yeah.
that you can experience, that are not the norm that you do. Or, again, it gets a chance to break away from all the chaos and all the, mundane day to day things, but just something out of the norm to, again, celebrate that me time. So,
Yeah, and I like what you just said about being out of the norm, whether it's being in the passenger seat, in the back seat,
right,
being a passenger to where, as you said, you have no responsibility. You're
right,
just looking at everything around you and taking it all in and doing what's not normal. Maybe it is the next town over. Maybe it's one of a 50 or 100 things in town that you haven't done that you're like,
right,
oh, yeah, you pass by it every day. And you're like, I wonder what that's like. It'd be cool to do that sometime. When is that sometime? Make that sometime now or this weekend, or put a deadline on it. I'm going to do that on X time, and
right,
set that time aside, because me time is important. That's what get where you get rid of all those distractions, get rid of those responsibilities.
right,
And if you want, share it with someone else, like with someone else, friend, family, whatever, significant other, someone who's important to you, and share it, because that's a combined experience. Then maybe they see things that you didn't, and there's a,
right,
oh, that's really cool, or oh, I didn't see that, that's so beautiful. And really being able to absorb what's around you, the five senses,
right.
well, maybe you don't taste the flowers because they can be poisonous, but the smell and the texture of certain rocks or walls, of like, I don't know, it takes me back to when I was in another country, where it's like, this is a building is older than the United States, and you can feel the presence, almost feel the presence, by
Right.
touching the
Right.
walls, because
Yeah.
it's thousands of years old, and the site and what does it sound like, the surroundings. I mean, there's all these things that you can just lock into and just lock everything else out and
Right.
really focus in for yourself. And that's what we're talking about. I mean, we can't go through all the possible options, but we're trying to encourage you to get that me time,
Right.
because it will recharge you. And Joe came out a few weeks ago, and a few weeks before that, I went out to see Joe, and it was the same sort of thing. Joe was driving; that was normal for him. But I was in the passenger seat, which is not very normal for me most
Right.
times, and it allowed me just to absorb the different scenery. I'm in the desert Southwest. Joe's in the Midwest. There's a lot of green stuff. I don't know what it was. He said it was trees and grass. I see rocks and shrubs, dead stuff. So there's a difference in the scenery. So I didn't know what the green stuff was. He had to tell me half a dozen times. There was another thing that had water in the rivers. We've got rivers that are dry, so I didn't know rivers actually had water in them. So just entertaining these different environments,
Right.
and appreciating the things that are around you, taking time to appreciate those things. Maybe it is that walk around the neighborhood, but now you're looking at it from a different perspective.
Right.
So if
Yeah.
I got to get my steps in, or I've got to get it in with, at this time, it's what about just pausing for a moment and just saying, you know what, I can take 30 minutes right now, or I can take 20 minutes right now, or I can take 2 hours, or I can take a day. Instead of doing this, maybe I'll just do this and do
Right.
something different out of the norm, to your point, out of that comfort zone to get that recharge. Because when you do something that's outside of your comfort zone that you're going to enjoy, it you get that excitement, you get those
Right.
endorphins. You
Yeah.
start, there's that happiness and joy that you're looking forward to say, wow, this is really cool. This is something that I'm glad I did.
Right. But again, in my case, it was things I was missing that I didn't know I was
Mm,
missing, and I think that was the excitement for me. Just the whole time was like you said, just discovering things again from a different perspective, being in the passenger seat and not having to worry about car, looking at my rearview mirror to change lanes, those types of things, but just being again present and in the surroundings. And like Dave was kind of, distracted by the green things. I was really distracted. I thought I was in a Holocaust or something. I didn't see any green grass. I didn't see any trees. I'm like, where am I? Did the zombie apocalypse hit now, or what's going on? So I had the
I didn't
reverse.
take you that far out in the desert.
But yeah, again, it's just that perspective, being in a different environment and actually being able to, enjoy that environment and,
Mm,
and those surroundings. So that's what we're really trying to drive home is the fact that it can be as simple as a walk, like you say, even walking around the neighborhood. Because typically, how do you get around your neighborhood? You drive, and
mm,
you may be driving even 5 or 10 miles, but you still don't smell, the air. You don't see. Maybe you walk and you're like, I didn't know that was there this whole time, and it has been, but you've been
mm,
speeding past it. So just again, a simple walk can change your perspective, or riding a bike. Because again, you're typically doing things at 25, 30 miles an hour. Now you may be doing them at 7 miles an hour, and you are able to absorb and see things and say, oh wow, I didn't know that was there. So just those types of things that we are missing
mm.
in our day to day, because we're all, tied to a job or family and all those responsibilities that we have. And so that's why we again have readdressed this topic about taking time for yourself, and like Dave said, it can be as minimalistic, or it can be take a trip around the world, if you can afford that or you're in that place. But just taking the time to really concentrate on you, it's the important piece of this.
And Joe, think about how many times we've talked to our friends or peers or colleagues or family members and say, when we talk about where we live, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you should see this site. You should see the Golden Gate Bridge. You should see
Right.
the Grand Canyon. You should see, um, you know, the monuments in Washington D.C. You should see the Statue of Liberty. You know, and you're in that state, and it's only an hour or 30 minutes. Or
Right.
you're in that city, and there's five things that are right there that you haven't visited or never visited, or it's been years,
Right.
and you tell people, "Oh, that's where you should go," and they're like, "Have you been?" You're like, well, no, I haven't been there, but that's where you should go because that's really cool.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
think about that. I mean, not
Yeah.
about the hypocrisy of it, but it's right there in your backyard, and you haven't.
Right.
You tell people this is a once in a lifetime thing, and it's in your backyard, yet you haven't done it.
You haven't done it yet. No.
And how neat would that be just to say, hey, it is right there. You've taken it for granted, but now I'm going to actually embrace it.
Right.
The museum in Kansas City when we went to the World War One museum. I mean, it's like right in your backyard. And it's like, to me, that was like, ha, ha, ha.
Right.
It's a piece of history. And it's like, it was literally 20 minutes away. So,
Right.
what things are that close that are impressive that you can experience that you haven't experienced? Or maybe it's been decades since you've experienced that you
Right.
can re experience at a different perspective, different age or time in your life.
No, I think that's very important. I'm glad you kind of mentioned that. Even going back to a place where you were decades ago, or years ago, and in a different time of your life, you're going to see it differently. So I think that's also important. Even if you visited these places or you've gone there, your mindset is probably going to be a little different than when you went there the last time. First time you went could have been for, for work,
Mm-hmm.
and then now you're going on your own leisure, and now you're experiencing it differently because you want to be there. So those types of things can make a difference as well. To revisit those things, and you're probably going to come out and say, "Oh, I didn't see that the first time," or
Mm-hmm.
"Wow, that's they got something new." So it just again, the whole premise behind this podcast again is about taking time for me. It's all about me. That's what we want you to walk away with. This theme
Yeah.
is it's all about me, and it's okay to say that.
Yeah. Give yourself permission to do these things. I mean, 30 minutes or 2 hours of watching TV or a movie versus 30 minutes or 2 hours and doing something you haven't done before,
Right.
or, you know, that perspective. I've been to the Grand Canyon once when I was, well, I'm going to say it, 40 years ago. That's a
Wow.
little bit different perspective when
Right.
your parents
Yeah.
say, "Get your butt in the car. This is where we're going," and you're saying, "Are we there yet?" And you get, "Oh, it's so hot. Yeah, it's cool. Whatever. I'm hungry." Versus now, you get there and you're like just in awe at the sheer vastness that something like that, how something like that could exist. And I'm
Right.
not saying it has to be that awe-inspiring. To your point, about an hour away is a petting zoo from us, with ostriches and all kinds of other things. And it's like, I haven't been there.
Right.
It's an
Yeah.
hour away. Why haven't I been there?
Right.
My wife has been there. Why haven't I been there? I mean,
Right.
she said it's great. So what about that? Think about those things, and, I took you to a couple of places, a couple of museums around town, and there's several more that I would have liked to take you to. But at this time of the year, it's really hot to be outside walking around
Right.
for an hour and a
Right.
half. We did
Yeah.
one. I wasn't about to do it again. So, we had some reprieve in between there, but it's those things that you drive by. One of the museums was literally 5 minutes from my house. And we went there, and it's just some of these things you take for granted, you drive by every day. And you
Yeah.
just are thinking, that would be cool to do sometime. Well, when is sometime?
Right.
Is 2 hours of watching TV or 2 hours of, mowing the grass, can those things be delayed just by a couple of hours or by a day to go
Right.
experience something new or that you haven't experienced in a long time? It could be boating. My wife's family, they have a small boat. I think it's a canoe or something like that. And they go out on this pond or this lake. That's their me time.
Right.
It's something as little as that. Where's that place of peace or that place of newness that you can just escape to and just refresh and recharge? And if you're out on the water, I don't know about you, I don't like deep water, but I'm
No.
pretty sure I'm going to be paying attention to what's going on around me before an alligator comes and gets me, or whatever sharks live in a pond.
Yeah, so I again I appreciate talking about the water, but again I'm not a big fan of the water either. But again, there are people out there that may enjoy that
Mm-hmm.
type of environment, or one of the things my daughter and son-in-law do and have been doing for in recent years is doing a lot of hiking,
Mm-hmm.
and so that is, and she'll tell you. Hey, I'm going to be unplugged for 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll catch up with you when I get back. But that's and I'm so glad that she's done that. They designed that me time for them to get away from the day to day grind and just step away from things and to explore and to be in the moment. And so now she has this portfolio of pictures of all the places she's been and all the things that she's experienced. So we're really excited that she's learned that at a young age and really experiencing that. So again, in my case, I'm doing this much later in life and taking the time to do that. So we're really happy for her to do that now.
And Joe, you said something important. We've actually had an episode before where we've talked about being unplugged.
Right. Yeah.
And this past week, when my wife and I took our trip, the cell phone reception was mostly not there.
Right.
So we were involuntarily unplugged. And you know what? That's kind of a good thing, because when you know you don't have any reception, or Wi-Fi or cellular service, it's a different attitude.
Right.
You don't need to check your phone. There's nothing that's going to
Yep.
be there.
Yep.
It's put it back in your pocket, zip it up in your backpack or whatever, and just appreciate what's around you.
Yep. No, you're right. Again, we become so dependent on technology and our devices that it's funny because we were driving somewhere just yesterday, and we drive past this business, and we see two young men leaning up against the wall. It looks like they were at work and scrolling on their phone.
Mm-hmm.
It just, again, that's how connected we have to be, or we feel like we have to be. So you're right. Just even if you're forced into that position where you can't access
Mm-hmm.
because of network or whatever, that could be a good thing because we don't practice it enough on our own.
Mm-hmm.
Again, everybody's looking at their phone, and missing out on all those things that are around
Mm-hmm.
us. So yeah.
Absolutely. And again, the trip that my wife and I took, it's the first trip that we've taken together in years. It's
Wow.
always with a family member or to go to see someone, or go to something very specific like a
Right.
conference or something. This is the first time I'd say it's been at least 10 years. And it's even better because my wife is recently retired. So there is no, oh, we're going to take this trip, but I have to go back to work,
Right. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and that's a completely different feeling. And I'm not trying to say, well, if you have to go back to work, don't take the trip. What I am saying, it's a different perspective.
Right.
We knew that we were going to go to a certain location as a home base, and then we were going to try to do different things. And a few of the things that we wanted to do, we didn't do.
Right.
And that's okay because we wound up doing a few other things that were completely unexpected, and there was so much to appreciate about those different places. This one town
Right.
has three national monuments within 30 minutes of it. That is amazing. Not many cities have that ability. And that was one of the things that we did. And it was really unique and very, and just mind blowing, that have
Right.
something so close. Like when you were here, two things that are within 30 minutes and we did them. And it's each time I go, it's a different perspective.
Right.
And that's the unique thing. Like you had mentioned, you could have gone 40 years ago, you could have gone 2 years ago. Things are going to be different
Right.
because you're in a
Yep.
different headspace.
Yep. No, I again appreciate the ability for now being able to do that because again, in the past that wasn't where I was or in a position to do those things. So
Mm-hmm.
now that I've done it, like I said, me and the wife have now are considering and planning on those types of things, like you just said. And that's a different space for us to be in because again, it's always been about responsibilities and all those things. But now we are more intentional about creating more me time and experiencing some of those things. So that, like I said, just last night we talked about going to a petting zoo
Mm-hmm.
and things we hadn't considered over the years. So um, it's not too late. Like I say, I'm happy that my daughter is doing it much younger than us, and she'll have all these experiences to reflect on. But I'm not again going to take it for granted the experiences that we're now creating or having
Mm-hmm.
are not as relevant. So again, being more intentional about me time has become a huge priority for us.
And we've got a couple minutes left, so I'm just going to wrap it up by saying on my final thoughts. Think about your kids too. If you have
Right.
children or nieces or nephews, or maybe you're mentoring other people or coaching other people, think about that too. Because if you go to, and this is going to sound silly, if you go to a theme park at 5, it's going to be a completely different theme park when you're 15 or
Right.
25
Yeah.
or 50. You
Yeah.
know, it's completely different. So think about that when you revisit some of these places that you've been to before, maybe with someone younger or older. Maybe that's an opportunity for them to re-experience something that they haven't had a chance to do or done
Right.
in a long time.
Well, thanks for that summary, Dave. And again, I won't add much more than that, but just the idea that I think that's a very important point to bring up. The fact that even if you've been somewhere, it is going to be a different approach because me and the wife were just having that same conversation about our local, amusement park, and we were like, I wonder if, as a kid, we took our kids there when they were kids, but now we're like, we wonder if they've been back since then, now that they have kids. And so that's just to your point. Their perspective is going to be different now because they were wanting to jump on the roller coasters and have the good time. And now they're going to be parents taking their kids to the smaller rides and things like that. So, again, as we mentioned before, the idea is to really be intentional about taking advantage of me time. Again, it just does so many things for the soul and to help you recharge, re-energize, and get prepared for whatever's coming down the road. So, we just want to thank you all for tuning in again. And again, as if there's topics you want to hear about, if there's things that you want us to discuss, please feel free to reach out to us. Our information is always in the description. And again, we want to continue to do this as long as it's going to continue to help you. And we've said it before, if we help one person, then we've done what we set out to do. So, with that, we want you to continue being your not so ordinary you.